here we are, Talbot Street.
Everybody's come through the doors of this building, haven't they? And all sorts of things.
Yeah, they've come through for complaints, confessions to murder, and of course Jerry Hutch snuck in this building as well late at night one night and did an interview.
And flowers.
And flowers.
Don't forget the flowers, because we're going to tell all these stories at the Cork Podcast Festival, which is our show's actually on the 30th of March in the Opera House. Tickets are on sale from the corkpodcastfestival.ie, and they're selling fast. We've only got, 2 weeks left?
2 weeks left, yeah.
So this 60-year-old nicknamed the vet, we can categorically say he ain't a vet.
No, he's not a veterinary surgeon for sure. But that's a nickname that he has.
A Vietnam vet.
Well, I cannot reveal any further information. But yeah, this guy, he's getting on in years, but he's been a prime target for Gardaí for a long time, and it is a major seizure of cocaine, £10.6 million worth. So it qualifies as one of the biggest this year.
Was he moving it at the time?
Well, he was moving it in a truck, and what's happened is he was stopped at a service station. The guards swooped in. When they searched the truck, they obviously had some information because it was in a concealed compartment. And they seem to have had to brought in X-ray machines and everything to get at this concealed compartment. So this is a major seizure. It's been linked to one of these shipments that lands off the coast of Ireland and is brought in by rib boats. It seems to have, the belief seems to be that it had been in the country for a period of time and is now being moved, as often would happen, and that ultimately this seizure is being linked back to the family, the West Dublin drugs gang, who've really become the primary target.
So they are obviously shipping cocaine directly and dropping it off the coast of Ireland, the family, which is a very sophisticated thing for them to have.
Yeah, it is. But I think there is a belief that it's these conglomerations of a number of criminal gangs involved where people I'll buy 20% of that shipment. Somebody gets it to the coast, and then you have specialist logistics people ready to come in and take it in. So
how do we monitor how much of that stuff is getting through? Well, there used to be that kind of figure that they reckoned 10% of drugs were seized, coming into a country, and particularly like Ireland. But how do they do that when these shipments are so massive, coming in directly and being transported by ribs or whatever onto the coastline?
I mean, I don't think...
We've no idea how much is getting in.
We've no idea, but we do know that cocaine can be purchased in almost every village in the country. So we know
all these sort of things as well. Wasn't there something there about the water, and that there's a lot of ketamine and cocaine in the water supply around Dublin? Is it?
Well, I think it was said in Dublin, but I mean, look,
higher than European standards.
Yeah, we're in one of the top in Europe. That cocaine is just become so readily available.
We're obviously missing out on something that everybody else is partaking in.
Well, I mean, look, this guy that has been arrested, he's not been charged, but he's currently in custody. He is an example of one of these kind of rural, he's based in the southeast of the country, has ran a number of legitimate businesses, was previously involved in other types of criminal activity up around the border area, some of it involving smuggling, fuel smuggling, things like that. But he's an example of one of these guys who've, I suppose, helped bring drugs to that, to rural Ireland, and is regarded as being a significant player and a prime target for Gardaí. It's not somebody that is going to be in and out of the papers on a weekly basis, but it's certainly somebody of significant criminal pedigree. And you can see how these things operate.
So he's moved from sort of border activity with the Provos back in the day.
Yeah, the sort of the Slab Murphy sort of gang.
So that's sort of cigarette smuggling and money laundering, and
the fuel smuggling was a big
there was
thing.
Never any indication there was any sort of drug trafficking in that. But I think what we saw from the EncroChat information was that those who are smuggling, who are involved in the moving of drugs from one place to another, will smuggle anything. They will smuggle cigarettes, human beings, and, cash and drugs.
Yeah, of course, it's become a sort of a supply business, I suppose. Certainly the Slab Murphy sort of crew, I suppose, who were based in South Armagh, were provisional IRA people. But ultimately, as the ceasefire, happened, that sort of border smuggling went on, and there was huge amounts of money to be made in for example, cleaning green diesel. That was a big money spinner, and also just moving stuff across the border. It was, we can look at, the amount of money made was immense, and it featured in, I think Panorama did a big special on it, how it was reinvested in property in the UK. You would be staggered. So this guy has been is suspected of being mixed up with these people. He's come before the courts for a number of as part of criminal investigations into that general world of smuggling.
In relation to business fraud, sort of, as opposed to, and money laundering as opposed to actual. I mean, it is a different thing to be transporting drugs in the back of a van, driving a van.
It is a different thing. Now, you will often see, even if people are quite high up the criminal ladder, and we've seen again and again, while there are a few that will go to any length to stay away from it, inevitably, these guys sometimes feel like they have to do it themselves. They can micromanage. Maybe not, they're not at the absolute pinnacle, but they still get involved. And that clearly is the case here.
You also see sometimes people of this vintage, he's now in his 60s, and he has spent a period of time in prison, that they come out and they have to do something to replenish the funds because they have built a lifestyle, of course, over years of being involved in criminality that you're probably just not going to be able to meet if you haven't been in the job market and you're not the CEO of a big firm. There's so much money to be made that sometimes they will do riskier things.
Yeah. And now remember, there was an insurance thing in place here that this seems to have been so well concealed that, we don't know, but we can only presume that the guards had some sort of intelligence that led them to investigate to such an extent. But it was so well concealed that it wasn't easy to get out, even knowing something might be there. So there is some insurance, and those things can work. If he had been stopped and searched, without that intelligence, he presumably would have got away. So. Yeah, it's.
And on top of it, then you're seeing yet another blow to the family organisation, who we spoke about before, because they are one of the top targets of the Garda National Drug and Organised Crime Bureau, and they're a massive grouping that have grown significantly over the past 10 years, but particularly since the demise of, I suppose, the Kinahan operation in this country. But only to actually do damage to these groupings, you have to kind of be relentless in your approach to them. And it's the kind of the one after the next seizures that actually will eventually affect them.
Yeah.
Because 10 million worth of cocaine, we could try the sum, but we mightn't. But they haven't paid 10 million for that amount of cocaine. That's the street value of it. So say, for example, we'll just take figure of 100,000, isn't going to have much impact on them. But if you're having that sort of seizure level and arrests and focus on your grouping over a prolonged period of time, they will eventually be dismantled.
Oh, totally. And there have been people that have been arrested in recent operations, not to get into the specifics of it, where, those are trusted people and they're no longer available. Now, the family network have a core grouping that probably can remain trustable, but they are eking away at it. I mean, they literally are eroding the crime gang. That's what happened with the Kinahans in Ireland as well. We're still expecting that they will at some point take out the very top layer, but they just literally swooped up the lower levels, and it stops it functioning. Nobody can afford to keep losing that money, and then of course paranoia and all of that sets in, and people don't want to deal with them or are reluctant to pay them back. They're.
You know much in way of his early background? Was he from? This arrest happened in Kilkenny. Is he somebody that is coming from?
Well, I mean,
an arena which would have been involved in criminality, or is he from a privileged?
Well, I mean,
home?
It's described as being one of these guys, a Del Boy type who despite not growing up in that world, has almost sought it out and become, managed to get himself mixed up in stuff that he had no business getting involved in, that he was described as having a privileged middle class upbringing. Ken Foy wrote about it in the Irish Independent and the Sunday World, how people who know him and have dealt with him over the years, he's getting mixed up at the very highest level of criminality. He's not coming from that sort of place. And you do get some...
Who had an education and who had, opportunities where others wouldn't have.
And there are always people like that. I mean, they are to a lesser amount of them, but there are always
They're
people...
sort of nearly addicted to crime, aren't they, those...
They are. They're thrill seekers, and you see it even in the US and in other countries. You will always find a couple of people that come from a certain background. We've obviously spoken about Kieran Sam O'Sullivan, for example, in recent times, who's associated with Christy Kinahan and is currently being investigated by CAB. But you do get these people who almost go out of their way to become involved in criminality. And they are...
Ryan Wedding would be another one who we were speaking about recently,
yes.
the Canadian snowboarder who came from a very privileged background and ended up running a sort of a cell structure for the Sinaloa.
Oh, yeah, like it's always happens, and they often are of a type. I mean, Del Boy type is what's described as there, but they tend to be these charming, intelligent sort of guys who could almost pass as lovable rogues if they weren't operating at the highest level of organised crime.
Can't keep themselves out of trouble.
No, and they want that risk taking and drama and adventure.
So while we say he hasn't been charged as of yet, the information is that they are expecting to be able to bring a serious charge on him. The arrest, there was follow-up searches on some business premises and a home as well, and revenue customs were there along with some members of the Gardaí's stolen motor vehicle investigation unit.
Yeah. So look, these are complex.
Never heard of that before.
No, well, they tend to be complex investigations. Obviously, a total of 152 kilos.
They were involved in dismantling the hidden compartment, actually. So they're obviously vehicle experts.
Yeah.
And following the operation, Assistant Commissioner Angela Willis, who's now in charge of organised and serious crime, said this is a further example of An Garda Síochána's commitment to target the enablers and facilitators of organised crime, who we would call the fixers.
There you go. Robbie Lawler was out of control.
This is Double Cross, the murder of Robbie Lawler.
It was going to be an all-out war with him in the middle of it.
A Crime World special investigation podcast based on my new book, Web of Betrayal, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Nicola Tallant and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.